Those humans are out there again, Limbun muttered. With a sigh, Rendon looked up from his display. Still, he corrected. They're still out there. Don't be ridiculous. Limbun shot him an annoyed glare, his nictating membrane shivering over wide eyes. They were there when I went off shift. They must have rested. Rendon smirked and swiveled the screen around, calling up a time-lapse for security footage. On it, 4 humans wearing vibrant orange and yellow robes were hunched over a small patch of flooring in the secondary market. The crowd parted around them like water, clumping to watch for a brief time before wandering off on their business. All the while, the 4 brightly clad humans remained. The only visible motion was the rapid, precise movements of their hands. Ridiculous, Limbun scoffed. Even humans would be in discomfort after that long. The other supervisor chuffed out a quiet laugh and swiveled the screen back. Tell them that, he said, if you're so concerned. I will. Limbun got up. Yet you're still talking to me. A mistake I keep making. I won't be long. Limbun ducked out to the office's single door. The noise of the station pressed upon him as the door hissed quietly aside. Distant conversations and the motion of thousands of varied feet blending into a low roar. It intensified as he drew near to the market. There, it was a merry cacophony, enough that they'd had to make accommodations for echolocators twice now. He flicked his tongue out in displeasure, refocusing on his task. The secondary market was, confusingly, half again as large as the primary one. The train station had experienced a precipitous growth since it was built, and now served as a nexus for most species in the region to meet, discuss, and rob each other. Limbun's job was to make sure that last was accomplished with contracts, rather than coil guns. Among other things. He flicked his tongue again, quickening his pace. There was a small crowd around the seated humans now, silently watching them do whatever it was they were doing. Limbun shouldered his way through the mob until he could get a better look at the 4. They each had a long, slender metal instrument, with which they gently tapped out a fine coloured sand upon the decking. They were most of the way through an intricate image of some sort, depicting a geometric circular design with impossibly rich detail. It put a hitch in Limbun's step for a moment. They had made that out of sand? What were they planning on doing? Spraying it with fixative? On his decking? Limbun arrived just shy of the nearest figure, and reached out to tap the human on the shoulder. Station administration, Limbun said gruffly. The human looked up at him. His skin was smooth, even across the top of his head. Most humans Limbun had met took great pride in their hairy skulls, but none such was in evidence here. His eyes crinkled, mouth curved, and he rose with a smooth motion to stand before Limbun, and above him, much to the supervisor's annoyance. Supervisor, the human said, inclining his head slowly. How may I be of service? Traffic in the market has been disrupted by your activities, and for far longer than we anticipated. Limbun stepped back so that he wouldn't have to crane his head to glare. I understand you have some dispensation for cultural exchange, but the memo said you'd be performing a public art demonstration. It would have been courteous to mention that you would be accomplishing this task by the slowest conceivable means. The man's face remained fixed in a polite smile. I apologize if we have been unclear, he said. The means and the time is a crucial element of our task. Of course it is, Limbun sighed. Unfortunately, we were not made aware of what you were doing. The picture can't stay here. There is a particulate hazard, not to mention toxicity, to consider, and we can't allow any variation in floor height that exceeds... Supervisor, the man said, his voice still low and calm. We have again been unclear. This image is not meant to remain. We will finish, and then we will leave with the sand." Limbon blinked, which was a rather lengthier process for his species than most. After another moment, he looked askance at the picture. "How?" he asked. "You can't have to move that without damaging it." "We will gather the sand with a brush and place it in a container," the man said, still with that infuriating expression of calm. "The image was never meant to be anywhere but here. When we leave, we will take the sand to Som 1 and pour it into a river on the northern continent, so that it can flow and spread with the water." "But why?" Limbon asked. "You're sitting here disrupting station activities for the better part of 10 duty cycles, subjecting yourselves to severe strain, and all for no benefit whatsoever." The man's face changed. Finally, his mouth smoothing and his eyes opening a bit wider, they looked down at Limbon. Limbon felt uncomfortably observed in that moment, and resisted the urge to take another step back. "You're proud of the station," the man said. Limbon's scowl returned. "With reason." "Of course, it is a marvelous place." The man inclined his head again. "Built by thousands, home to thousands more. Skilled people like you, who dedicate themselves to making sure all of its parts work. Yet, you will not be here forever." The man's eyes were fixed, unblinking. "In the grand span of time, the station will not be here. The star, the galaxy. After that, what benefit will it have been that the floors were clean or the halls clear?" "That's not relevant to the present," Limbon snapped. "The station will be retired, yes, but it's ridiculous to expect any structure to be permanent on a stellar scale." The man's eyes crinkled again. "Of course it is. Yet we build our cities and our ships. We live our lives. There is little more benefit to that, in the end, than what we do with this sand." "You could be doing something productive, something useful." Limbon wanted to say more, but words were eluding him. It was unexpectedly challenging arguing with someone when all they did was agree with you. The man looked down at the picture, then turned back to Limbon with a sly grin. "Something that would endure?" he asked. There was a long silence. Limbon said nothing. The human smiled. A short while later, but longer than he had intended, Limbon returned to his post. "Hey," Rendon said, tapping his screen. "Saw you talking. They say anything interesting?" Limbon lowered himself into his chair. "Not really." One of the screens at his workstation was dark. He saw his reflection in it, marred by a slight film of dust across its surface. On one corner, thermal cycling had caused the laminate that ran across the screen to separate slightly, rippling it. He reached out and rubbed at it gently, to no effect. "Oh, that needs replacing," Rendon said. "I mean, maybe. It cut out a while back, but I don't think it was anything more than a secondary readout. Maintenance will get it in a few dozen cycles." A moment passed. Limbon's fingers stayed resting gently on the screen for a moment longer. "No," he said. "No, I'll do it." "Those screens are a real pain to swap out," Rendon warned. "Lot of little fiddly connectors to hook up. Just leave it for the techs." Limbon didn't reply. He looked at the console, at the lines of it, the gentle sweep of metal with its glowing inset panels, at the scratchings along one side, and the part where the housing was pulled away at the corners, at the 100 imperfections that he had left for one hypothetical maintenance cycle or another. They never fixed everything up, though. "It all breaks eventually, anyway," Rendon sighed. turning back to his own workstation. "It does," Limber murmured. "It does, but—" He let his fingers fall from the panel and started requisitioning parts.